Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So it's what the heck time is it? It's about 1900 Central Time. I'm here at the Walmart distribution center in North Platte, Nebraska. It's getting chilly, right? That giant pile of cold air is working its way, I guess, eastward. It's about 9 degrees. I think it's going to be right. It's going to be right at 0 in the morning here. Not super cold. I mean, that's cold. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to spend the night out there without a sleeping bag. But it's Nebraska and it's January, so it's not insane. I did pick up a couple of containers of Lucas Oil anti-gel at Walmart over in Lexington before I came over here. Good prices. I got a jug. Actually, I got 2 jugs, but I got this one. This treats 300 gallons, and I think it was only like, it wasn't even 14 bucks. So 300 gallons. So I put a little bit in my reefer. I put some in the other night. I had some, like, same company makes Blue Def. I had some quart containers. I threw a little in the reefer that I got and fueled and some in each tank. But like I said, that bottle, 300, so that's at least like 2 treatments. That's like, really, I mean, supposedly we hold 200 gallons. It's really hard to get that much in these tanks. Like, I just pumped right around 90 gallons, and I put a little bit of fuel, like a couple 3 gallons in the reefer, but just enough to mix in the extra anti-gel I used. And by the way, you know, the maintenance department at Prime says, you know, you should be using anti-gel anytime it's below 32 degrees. If they're buying the anti-gel, which they're not for me, right? But if you're a company driver and they're just giving you, half a case every time you're in a terminal, hey, do what they say, right? But truthfully, the one thing I learned working at J&R Schugel, because Schugel's up in Minnesota, so they're used to really cold temperatures. They would always tell us, if it's going to be below 15 degrees, then use anti-gel. So I kind of use that as my benchmark. And so, just pay attention to the overnight temperatures and stuff like that. So anyway, like, I knew it was going to be that cold. And when I stopped at Walmart in Lexington, I got the stuff. I also picked up a jug of coolant because I've been getting I'm a little low on coolant, not terribly, but it was like, it wasn't even 20 bucks, and it's for heavy duty vehicles. And like, I looked at some coolant at the Love's the other day. It was like 35 bucks for a gallon jug of it. So, you could save a little bit of money by planning ahead. So, like I said, I still got about half of one of these left, in this full one, of course. So I should be good for a while. Once I get done with this load, I'm going to have a little bit of free time. I don't have to pick up until Monday morning in Crete, Nebraska. And then that load's going out to Riverside, California. So hopefully won't need any more anti-gel for a little bit. But I saw on the signboard headed west as I was coming out here on I-80 that westbound 80 in Wyoming is closed. I don't know the extent of it, but the website that you want to be on if you got to be in Wyoming is roads.com. State of Wyoming has a great website. Like, they are on top of it. They can tell you the pavement temperatures in all these different locations. I mean, their website is really, really helpful. It breaks it down. It's not generalized. It's broken down, man. Like, it seems like it's 25 miles at a time all the way across 80, and also up 25 and a couple of other big highways. So if you're trying to get across Wyoming, you might want to check and see if it's open, and don't go all the way there. I'd say if you're headed west, stop in Nebraska. Don't go all the way till you see the gate down. So this date, 28 January, few events in history that I thought were kind of noteworthy. On this date in the year 1814, Charlemagne died. And if you don't know who Charlemagne is, you should. He's probably one of the most important figures in Western history, certainly. When I say, Western history, I mean Western civilization. But certainly, in the history of the world that we know of. Charlemagne was, he's been called the father of Europe because basically he reunited Europe. So parts of Italy, France, Belgium. He was born in Liège, which is in Belgium today. And, but he, all of France, parts of Spain, he's called the father of Europe. And in fact, some genealogists have said that almost any modern European, on continental Europe, can trace their lineage back to Charlemagne. And Charlemagne, by the way, is like an English derivation of what his name really was, because he was Frankish, right? So he didn't speak English. In fact, he didn't speak French either. They had a different language back then. But Charlemagne basically means Charles the Great. So it comes from Charles de Charlemagne, which means Charles the Great in like Frankish, whatever the Frankish language was then. But anyway, so Charlemagne was really the first Holy Roman Emperor, and that was a title that was conveyed upon him by the Pope in the year 800. So Charlemagne was a pretty big deal. And actually, they've done some exhumation stuff with he's buried in a cathedral in Aachen, which is also I think Aachen is actually in the Netherlands now. But they've done x-rays and stuff on his tomb, and one estimate earlier was that he was like 6'5", which is extraordinarily tall for his time. Well, actually 6'5" is extraordinarily tall anyway. There's maybe 1% of all the men in America are 6'5" or greater. But then more recent scholarship, x-rays of his tomb and everything, they think he was probably around 6 feet tall, which would still have been significantly taller than the average male. So he would have been he would have stood out in a crowd. Because 6 feet is still, if you're 6 feet, you're tall. But in that time, it would have been quite noticeable. Because a lot of people, like I said, the average was 5'7" back then for males. So he would have stood head and shoulders above people, and he would have been the big man on campus, which he was. It's so funny because I was looking at all these cultural references about Charlemagne, and to my dismay, they did not list Kid Charlemagne. The song Kid Charlemagne by Steely Dan, they did not list that as a cultural reference. So I chucked my phone straight out the window. I was like, Wikipedia sucks. No. Yeah. Come on. Charlemagne. The other thing that I always have remembered since I was a kid, and I don't remember the poem, but there was a poem in which there was a verse that said, and so the sword of Charlemagne the Just has turned to ferric oxide, known as rust. And that always helped me remember the chemical name for rust, ferric oxide. Also, another interesting fact about Charlemagne. I mean, like, the guy is worthy of, lots of talking. But apparently, he was the basis of the character Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So it's that's fiction. The Knights of the Round Table is fiction. However, he was the basis for King Arthur. So anyway, that's Charlemagne. The other thing that happened on this day, and I remember it vividly, 1986, the shuttle Challenger explodes shortly after takeoff from Cape Canaveral. And I remember it so vividly for a couple of reasons. I'm not a prophet. I'm not, some psychic or anything. But I also, I kind of understand, because I've seen it firsthand, I kind of understand the limits of human beings and machines. And, it was so funny because I remember it was kind of lunchtime, because if you recall, it was really cold in Florida. And they delayed the launch for a while, hoping for temperatures to warm up, because they didn't want to launch in really cold temperatures, because freezing temperatures are bad for the shuttle and some of the machinery. And so they waited until later in the day. And this was the shuttle mission that the teacher, Krista McAuliffe, was on, by the way. And so it was around lunchtime on the East Coast, and I remember that because I went on the mess decks of the ship that I was on at the time, and it was lunchtime. But right, the morning of the shuttle disaster, we were at quarters, and I was like a second-class petty officer at the time. I wasn't, I was just a worker bee kind of. And we were just talking. We're like, "Oh, shuttle's going up today." Thought it was cool. And I said, one of these days, one of those is going to crash. Now, I actually thought that that there would be a shuttle disaster, like when they're trying to land the thing. I did not think that Morton Thiokol, rockets would malfunction and blow the whole thing up. But I did say, one of these days, there's going to be a disaster. And it wasn't unprecedented, right? I was old enough to have remembered the Apollo program, and so there were some close calls, and then Apollo 1, right? That's the one that during testing burned up on the launch pad and killed 3 astronauts, including Gus Grissom. So anyway, that's, as you can tell, a vivid memory for me. I remember it like it was yesterday. And of course, a lot of Navy ships were involved in trying to recover wreckage, and Navy divers were involved in that heavily and stuff. So anyway, that was kind of a scary, tragic day, and it was especially tragic because there was a teacher on board, and of course, all of her students were watching. So, anyway. So I wanted to talk about this phenomenon of really long deadheads. Lyle, the other day, in one of his videos, Lyle at No Hippie Trucking and Transportation, he mentioned, how long is too long of a deadhead? And, he kind of said he looks at every load individually. But then I was talking with Paul, who you may recall was on my truck as a trainee, and he was saying how he was asked to deadhead, I think from Kentucky or somewhere over that way, over to Kansas City to get a load. Now that actually happened to me a couple weeks ago. I was in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, and they were like, "Hey, all this, we have loads, but they're in Kansas City." So here's my calculus for a deadhead, right? Because first of all, deadheading is cheaper, it's less costly than hauling a loaded trailer, right? Why? Well, you weigh less. Now, of course, if you're going across, Wyoming, you want to weigh more because you don't want to get blown over, right? But all other things being equal, right? So there are people that are being asked to deadhead like 600 miles to get a load, but you're lighter because you're empty, presumably. It also is less wear and tear on the truck, right? Your tires wear out slower when you don't have any weight on them. And the thing is, if the load is paying you enough, those miles are, they're miles that you're not spending as much money to run, and you're getting a benefit. Now, some people are like, oh, I don't, deadhead miles, I don't make any money on deadhead miles. Well, that's always true. It doesn't matter if you run 1 mile or 1,000 miles. You don't make any money on them. But my view is that you want to look at what's the big picture here, right? Like, am I going to deadhead and lose money on the deal, right? So let's say that I got to run 600 miles and then I got to run 600 miles the other way, to triangulate it, right? So I'm running 1,200 miles, and let's say that load only pays like $1,200. Is it worth it to me to run for $1 a mile? Well, maybe not. But let's say that you're in a place that doesn't have any freight, right? There's nothing moving right now. Do you want to take the chance and wait there in hopes that something will break loose? Or do you want to just get on the road? Because the way I look at it is this. Let's say that it's a 1,200 mile trip and it pays $2,400. Well, by running that load, right, I keep myself busy, and at $2 a mile, I can still make something. Maybe not as much as I want to, but I can still turn a profit, okay? The other thing I'm doing, and Lyle mentioned this, I'm helping, I'm a team player, right? When I had to pick up and they said go to Kansas City, but it actually was Salina, Kansas, which is about 150 miles beyond Kansas City to the west, right? But I went and I picked up at Schwann's, like, Tony's Pizza, that stuff, right? And the load was going to Atlanta, or right outside of Atlanta. So, yeah, I ran over there from Tennessee, from north of Nashville. I ran over to Salina empty. But it was a drop and hook. It was pretty, but there had to be 15 Prime trailers on that location when I got there. Both Prime and there were some Wilson folks there. And, I was like, okay, I'm staying busy. And I don't remember exactly what the load paid, but my calculation was, hey, it's enough, right? Because it's still more than zero. Because here's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize or think about. They should realize it, but they don't necessarily think about it. My truck costs about $170 a day, even when it's not moving, right? I have fixed costs. Everybody has fixed costs. You're paying insurance every single day. You're paying road use tax every single day, right? And most of us are making payments. So the payment comes due whether that truck moves or not. So if I can go somewhere and turn a profit and some days, you just got to cover your costs, right? Some days you just want to break even. And people say, oh, well, I don't want to work for free. It's not working for free because it really is keeping you out of the hole, okay? Because remember, you're running a business. If you're leasing or lease purchasing, you're running a business, okay? not every business makes huge profits every day. Sometimes you gotta do something that your customers want you to do. And in a way, Prime is my customer, right? My fleet manager is my customer. So I got to do some stuff. And, there's a term for this, where you're not making much money, or maybe you're losing money, right? It's called a lost leader, right? Lost leaders are very common in retail. Like a grocery store will sell something for cost or below to get you in the store. It's just like a gas station. Ask anybody who runs a convenience store, where's the money? It's not selling gas, right? We're talking pennies per gallon, even no matter how high the price is, right? Because it's still pennies per gallon. Where they make money is you go inside and you buy this soda that costs them like 7 cents to provide to you. Well, 10 cents with the plastic cup, right? 10 cents, they sell it to you for $1.69. What's the margin on that? Same thing, you buy a pack of ho-hos, right? Ho-hos, right? Like, what are they selling for now? Like $3.59 a pack? Like, have you seen the price of like Hostess stuff lately? You go in and pay $3.59 for a pack of ho-hos. What did the store pay for them? $1.17. That's where the profit is, right? They're willing to, because they know if they have a huge margin on gas, you're going to go to another gas station. But if they can get you to come in and buy gas and then pay them, $2 for a cup of coffee that costs them 5 cents to make, that's how they make their profit. Now, in our situation, right, we can make a little bit more money by slowing down, by using that macro 27 or keeping track of where you're buying fuel, right? All those things make a difference. But and the other thing too is that sometimes you got to take a load, even if it's not super appealing, that gets you to a place that has a better load. Now, I took that load to Atlanta. I actually got a beer load at first out of Atlanta, which was not a good load. But I'll say fortunately for me, not fortunately for Prime, but fortunately for me, the preloaded beer trailer was jacked up and was not roadworthy, and I couldn't take it. I end up getting a load of Hershey's candy from a cold storage, and I ran that like 260 miles down to southern Alabama, but that load paid like $3.70 a mile, so it all comes out in the wash, and you just got to look at the big picture. So if you're being asked by your fleet manager to run several hundred miles, look at the big picture. Can you make some money at it? Can you make some money at it and live to fight another day? Because remember, the truck's sitting still. If you're a lease operator, you're an owner operator, the truck's sitting still, you're losing money, right? You're spending money. You're not spending fuel, although as cold as it is where I am, I'm probably going to use a few gallons of fuel tonight just to not freeze. So that's my take on the deadheading and stuff like that. Sometimes you just got to move to get better stuff. And also, it's just the setup. Maybe, like when I was at night, a lot of guys wouldn't take short trips because at night, people wanted miles, and at night, even company drivers could reject a load. And I can remember coming off home time, and my fleet manager, my driver manager, Paul was his name, he'd be like, "Hey Terry, can you just pick this load up at the terminal and take it over to New Jersey?" Now the terminal's in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Taking to New Jersey is like 130 miles, right? 160 miles maybe. I'm not making any money doing that. My base rate was like 40 cents a mile, and he would kick it. If it was a real short trip, you'd get more money at night. They have kind of a scale. But a lot of times, a lot of guys would reject that. I'd take that load, and then next thing you know, I get a pre-plan to pick up, down the road in southern New Jersey with a load going to Los Angeles. Cha-ching, right? Like, that's what we all want. So, you know, not every day is rainbows and butterflies, but, you know, you got to just roll with the changes sometimes. And, you know, I got to say this. You know, I talked to a lot of drivers, and people are making money. They're, you know, it's the timing isn't as great sometimes on when these loads, you know, deliver, so when you can get paid, etc. But, you know, like, I got a load, this load that I'm going to pick up is not going to deliver until Thursday out in California. So it's not going to be on this coming week's paycheck. But I'm working ahead, I guess, because the load I'm taking is almost as much as what I've already done for this coming week. So I'll have a jump on a big week, you know, not this Friday, but the following Friday. So anyway, a little bit of food for thought there. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.